Welcome back, and we're doing an impromptu live stream show today, and we're just going to have a little fun. Happy New Year! It's the New Year. Oh, we have a bird. She's going to make lots of noise. Say hi. It's a Bebop. She's our little mascot today. She makes lots of noise and she screams, so if she screams too much, I apologize. She's a sweetheart, though, and we love her a lot. She's our family pet, and she wants to join us in the hive today. Go figure. And I hope you guys had a great New Year. We sure did. We had a great Speedway show with Gene Woods today, and we just had a really great time. You can watch a dancing bird, too. It's free, no charge. And today we're going to talk a little Speedway, though, and we're going to talk about early day American Speedway. You know, there's a lot of history there that nobody knows about, and I have to dig some of that research and try to find out exactly. Because a lot of the people are like getting old. She's dancing for you. They're getting old, and maybe they pass away, and a lot of this history is going to be lost. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the early day Speedway. Actually, Gene Woods and we talked today on our live stream chat about the early day Speedway and about El Toro Speedway in particular. He told me a different account. He told me an interesting account, and it may be true, or it might be half true as far as a lot of the different kinds of things going on in that day. We're not really sure. But Gene was telling me that there was a raceway called El Toro Raceway. That was like one of the first early day, in the modern day Speedway tracks. It was called El Toro, and it was in El Toro, California. She's going to dance for you. I'll put her down so she can just dance. And in 1964, Gene Woods said that he was there with his brother Rick was racing, and I'm sure Rick was winning everything. He was a great racer. And they were racing like TT and flat tracks at El Toro. And Gene Woods would like find a beer can or Coke can, and he would put on his feet and he would slide around and pretend like he was a Speedway rider. A sign of things to come, Gene Woods. And so Gene was doing that, and these riders were riding a while, and they were doing really good for several years, from 64 to like at least 60, maybe 7 or 68. I'm not sure exactly the year. But there was another account on the El Toro Speedway that actually they weren't paying the Speedway riders that much money, and so when the riders would show up, the promoter would go ahead and like give them like $10 show up money, and then let's say the winner of the main event, the big winner of the night, he would just get nothing, and the riders would say, "Hey, where's my prize money?" And he'd say, "I gave you the $10. So that was another account of history. I wasn't there. I was too young. So that was in 1964 to 1968. I wasn't around. So, but there's an account, and maybe both. Maybe it was a mixture of both. We don't know. So we're going to keep digging on that. But that was interesting. And actually, the early day Speedway riders all came from the flat track. Gene was mentioning that to me today, and it really makes perfect sense. The early day Speedway riders were recruited from the Class C flat trackers, and they were racing at all these different places like Ascot and other parks. And actually, riders like Bill Cody and Sonny Nutter and Rick Woods, Greg Hazerock, and Sammy Taylor, and Sammy Tanner, and more, they came from the flat trackers. So when they started the Speedway back up, nobody knew exactly how to race Speedway. Everybody was like a flat tracker. So that was pretty cool. So they got them on a Speedway bike. And actually, the flat trackers, they raced at El Toro, and then later the Whiteman Stadium and South Bay. There was another track. There was two tracks. There was Whiteman and South Bay. And they were all flat trackers. When I looked at all the race photos, they were like flat tracking, and they were just like not riding the proper Speedway. They didn't know. They had no idea. They were flat trackers, and they were riding the best they could. They were probably really fast. These guys were fast. But their style was a little different. It was like the flat tracker. She thinks that's pretty funny. And so that's exactly what happens, because they didn't know how to ride Speedway. And later, it wasn't until like maybe the early 70s or so when Ivan Major and Barry Briggs came over, they actually had a USA versus the world race. And the American riders, of course, thought they were going to beat the Europeans. And the Europeans came in and they blew the Americans out. I mean, the Americans were like humbled. They had their tail between their legs and they were wiped out. Why? Why? Because the Europeans knew how to race Speedway the right way. And the Americans did not. They just knew how to ride the Class C racing, which basically means you sit your butt on the seat and you're riding like the old style, like the flat trackers. And that's not the way you ride the Speedway bikes. You actually get up high on the bikes and you ride it really like aggressive and stuff. No sitting down. That was my problem when I first started riding. I was lazy. Like my butt was on the seat. And Dangerous Doug Farrell told me, no, don't do that. So anyways, so Barry and Ivan went ahead and taught all these riders, including Mike and Steve Bass, how to ride Speedway the right way. And it worked. These guys just sponged up all the information and they practiced everything these European riders taught them. And they knew a lot. And they actually learned a lot. So that's exactly how it all got going. But the Americans actually buddied up with these guys and they just learned everything. So going back now a couple years before that to the Whiteman Stadium, in 1968 was the first year the Whiteman Stadium officially was open for Speedway. And they raced that was the revival of the modern day Speedway actually. It was Dude Criswell. Do you know Dude Criswell? He was the promoter and Dude was a rider too. I saw his name in the program. He was like these other guys like Whammy Lamarocks, Gene Woods, and Jack Milne. All these guys, well, I don't know about Jack, but all these guys were promoter and riders, and they were trying to clean up on the purse and promote and make the money at the gate. So they're very smart. But they went ahead and they started this Whiteman Stadium. It was on an oval racetrack. It was like a third of a mile. There was a car track in between there. There's I think a third of a mile. It was like a car track. And then there was like an asphalt track they had for cars and stuff like that. And then inside of that track, it was a car track, and then they built a D-shaped speedway track inside. It was a third of a mile speedway track. And the stock cars would race on the outside when they had the stock car races, and the speedway would race inside that track. And it was, one of the turns was actually a banked track, kind of like Victorville was. It's pretty cool. And then the other turn was flat. And the speedway track was like a 220-yard track around the whole track. So the spectators, it was like a D, so there was a straightaway that was kind of flat. And the spectators, I believe, sat behind that flat straightaway. And there was no crash wall. So I hope the riders didn't ride into the people. But actually, the people sat far back. And it made kind of It made for bad viewing, because the people sat so far back they couldn't kind of feel involved with the speedway, and that was kind of maybe one of the problems with the thing. And there was a crash wall on the back side where the turns, the D shape. There was a crash wall on that side, and in turn 3 and 4 there was the pits where the racers pit. So that was actually, they had the pits, and then they had the spectators. They sat back. It was in Pacoima, California. I don't know where that place is. And they had an airport hangar. It was like a little airport. And then they built this track and the speedway track in the middle, the car and the speedway track. And so and the hangar was here, and then the car racing and motorcycle was outside the hangar. So that was cool. And actually, one of the interesting things to one of the early day riders just yesterday, Greg Hazeroth. Do you know Greg Hazeroth? He was an early day rider with like all these legends legends, and he was a good rider. He was in a lot of the main events, and he kind of was battling it out with Bass and Rick Woods and Sonny Nutter and all these early day legends. He wasn't number one, I must say, but he was there like in main events and fighting those very talented riders. So that's, tip my hat off to Greg for that. But he was mentioning to me that my old tuner was named Jerry Fairchild. He was an old guy, an old timer back in the early days. Rest in peace, Jerry. He passed away to the next world, and we want to go ahead and rest in peace to you, Jerry. But Jerry went ahead and brought some of his old JAPs to the Whiteman Stadium. I could just see Jerry bringing a bunch of old JAPs in a truck on, okay, young fellas, you're going to ride. It's pretty funny. You're going to ride the Speedway, and Jerry's like bringing all these Speedway bikes, JAP Speedway bikes. And that was the first Speedway bikes since the revival of Speedway, because actually before they actually rode all the JAPs also. So JAPs have a big history in the early day American Speedway. So that's pretty cool. And the riders all rode JAPs, like I mentioned, Rick Woods, Sonny Nutter, the Bass brothers. I read that Mike and Steve Bass, that was their first bike, and they went ahead and shared the JAP. And they actually just found out about the races. Their uncle Harlan was a racer at the time, and Mike and Steve just said, let's go check out the races, and they liked it. So that was pretty cool. So everybody rode what? The JAP. The JAP is not Japanese, it's for the J.A. Presswich. It was the designer of the JAP motorcycle. He was a genius. I have a whole blog on that. And he was an amazing engine builder. He built the best Speedway engines and motorcycle engines and airplane engines. And he was the inventor of the lead pencil. Did you know that? J.A. Presswich, he invented the lead pencil back in like 1908 or something like that. So we're going to talk more about him maybe in another blog. He is really an incredible guy with a lot of history. So anyways, Speedway actually was racing like in the mid-50s. There was a program I saw at the Santa Monica Pier, and they had all these early day racers like Lammy Lamarocks and stuff like that. But they were racing in the 50s. But, so going back into the Speedway, the Whiteman Stadium only lasted 1 year. 1 year! And that was the same year that South Bay Speedway came into existence, and that lasted 3 years, from 68 to 71. That was in Los Angeles, California, and Whiteman lasted only 1 year. Probably, they say, because the spectators weren't that many, and also the view was very far back, and they couldn't get a good whiff of the oil and seeing the excitement of the Speedway race. So I guess that was kind of one of the problems. And probably, I don't know this, but I'm speculating here, probably I'm right, that Harry Oxley and the famous 1937 world champion Jack Milne, they went to the Whiteman Stadium and they noticed like some of the problems that there was, like the spectators sitting far back and maybe not being able to experience the whole Speedway thing. And they went ahead and they started designing the Costa Mesa Speedway, maybe doing the architecture planning with the Costa Mesa Fair Board, and they start planning the rejuvenation and the bringing the Costa Mesa Speedway into existence, which actually, but Whiteman, like I say, lasted 1 year, and the first Speedway United States champion was that year at Whiteman Stadium. I believe it was on the JAP, and it was the Rocket. Rick won the United States Championship in 1968. He was the first United States Speedway champion in the modern era. We call it the modern era because there was an earlier time, too, that they raced Speedway. And it died off. Ouch! It died off, and it came back in 1968 officially. So Rick Woods was the first United States Speedway champion. And in 1969, in the summer of 69, was when the Costa Mesa Speedway was originated in the summer of '69. That's a song by Bryan Adams, I think. Yeah, that's a good song too. I like that song. And in '69, the Costa Mesa Speedway was in existence, and it became a big hit. And the first announcer of the Costa Mesa Speedway was Bruce Flanders. Rest in peace. Bruce passed away this past year in 2020. And Bruce was an amazing announcer. He spent his whole life announcing Speedway. He had a very cool voice. It was like a baritone voice. And he had a lot of banter. He told a lot of jokes. He was a cool guy. Bruce Flanders, rest in peace. We all love and we miss him so much. He was an announcer at Industry Hill Speedway before his passing. And he did the Long Beach Grand Prix, Acura Grand Prix. He did everything, all the motocross races. Bruce was a golden voice. And he was the first announcer of the Costa Mesa Speedway. And then later they went ahead and, I guess they switched Bruce and brought Larry Motormouth Huffman. Now Larry, I'm trying to get on this show, his webcam isn't working. And he was the second announcer. He had a golden voice also. They called him Motormouth. Why? Because he could talk like 5,000 words in 1 minute. He go, he spoke really fast, Larry Huffman. And he did a lot of commercials for the Grant Boys in Costa Mesa. Do you remember that one? So Larry Huffman was a great announcer, and he was known for the Huffman Shuffle. Do you remember the Huffman Shuffle? He would like stand up while he would announce a rider like Danny Bazecco Becker, and he would jump up and his feet would like dance like this, and he'd do like the splits in midair and come down. Whoa! And everybody went crazy. There was like 6,000. Yeah, there was like 6,500 fans every night at the Costa Mesa Speedway. Costa Mesa was the place. The Whiteman Stadium, the El Toro Speedway, and the South Bay Speedway couldn't generate the people, but Costa Mesa did. And it was the place to be. Every Friday night, people would go. And Larry Huffman went ahead and dazzled the people with all of his show and everything. It was great. And actually, the Costa Mesa was really good luck because in the late 60s, they had like the surfing craze, they had the skateboarding craze, they had the BMX bicycle craze. Saddleback Park became, big in around 1970 or something like that. So the motorcycle craze came really big, and they had a popular movie. Do you remember On Any Sunday? That came out about the early 70s, I guess it was. So everybody started loving motorcycles, and there was lots of riding areas, and it was really great. I was riding my motorcycle a lot in the early days, and it was a lot of fun. So the Costa Mesa was a benefit of all this surf craze, and everybody came out because they wanted to watch the Speedway. It was before the internet, too. There was no internet back then. So people just came out and watched the Speedway. Like I mentioned, there was like 6,500 people every Friday night at the Costa Mesa Speedway. It was jam-packed, and it was a lot of fun. My first race was when I was like a little tiny boy. There was a student of mine, a friend of mine. He was a classmate sitting next to me named Mike DeMont. He finally accepted my friend request on Facebook. Thank you, Mike. And Mike went ahead and told me, like, hey, Brian, do you want to go do something Friday night? And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, my sister works at the beer stands at the Costa Mesa Speedway, and I can bring one other person, and would you like to go? And I'm like, what is the Costa Mesa Speedway? I never heard of that. So he said, I don't know, it's like a motorcycle race. So I went ahead and said, okay. And I went to the Costa Mesa Speedway that Friday night, and it was amazing. I loved it. I was like, thought it was the best thing on two wheels. The best thing on two wheels was the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds and the Speedway races. Those guys were radical. They were like riding really fast on this little oval bull ring track at Costa Mesa. It was crazy. The fans were screaming. and there was smell of castor oil. It was beautiful. They ran nitro, and the bikes were crazy fast, and all these new famous Speedway riders came. They were the flat trackers. They all became famous Speedway riders. And you just had like big party there, lots of people. You had Gene the dancing machine. Do you know Gene the dancing machine? He was a dancer. He had beer all the time. He was like drunk. And I think he's still alive today. I think he stopped drinking so much beer. But he would like yell, "More beer!" And everybody would yell, "More beer!" I was a cheerleader for, I guess he sold beer at the concession stand. He probably had like a business of selling the beer, maybe 25% commission out of all the beer sold or something. I don't know. But Gene was getting all the crowd excited, and he would yell, "More beer!" It was fun. I was only a little kid, and I'm like, oh. And then the next week came, and then I told Mike, I said, you know, I really like that Speedway race. I would like to go back again. Can I go back and watch the Speedway? And he said, no, Brian, you can never go back. And I said, why? That was the best thing in the world. And he said, well, my sister, she can't let you come in. I think she's going to get fired. And she doesn't want you to come back. So you're never going to go to another Speedway race the rest of your life. And I said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You see those trophies? They're not from dancing ballerina. And I said, oh, I will go back and I will race Speedway, or I'll watch it. I didn't think about racing, actually. It was like pure entertainment. So I went ahead and I just like asked my mom, like, hey, Mom, could you take me to the Costa Mesa Speedway? And she didn't want to take me to no race thing. And I'm begging her, please, Mom, please, thinking Mike can't take me no more. And finally she said, okay. So I had to like meet people at the Speedway, and I had to have them drive me home after the races, like to my neighbors, like, where are you going home? And they say, I'm going down the 55 to like Riverside. And I say, could you give me a ride home? I live off the Chapman off-ramp, the Chapman East off-ramp. Just drop me off. And so I would get rides home. My mom would take me to the races, and I would like ask people, like, please give me a ride home. And they gave me a ride home, thank God. They didn't kill me, so I'm here, so I'm still alive. So back in the old days, they did that. Today, you'd never do that, of course. You'd never ask for rides home. But back in the early days, I was so desperate to like go to the races. I would do anything to go to the Speedway. And I loved it so much. And I always remember like Rick Woods riding. He was always like riding the pole, and he was so fast. And I was just like loving it, and it was so great. And I was just like in love with Speedway. And like I say, I didn't think I would be a rider, but who knows? Oh, maybe. I don't know. And I was a rider, actually. But the Costa Mesa Speedway had a lot of fun. I was, like I say, only like a little 11-year-old, 10-year-old boy. And I used to see like Gene Woods there being announced by Larry Huffman. And he was like my age, like 10 years old. And I'm like, that's not fair. But he was the younger brother by 10 years of the Rocket Rick Woods. And of course, he had a lot of benefits because he was the brother of the Rocket. And I would see Jeff Ward and all these guys. And I would see like Gene Woods with the first junior Speedway bike, I think was built by Ed Schaefer. He sponsored Rick Woods. He built the Speedway bikes, and Ed Schaefer was genius. He passed away of a heart attack, rest in peace, Ed. And he went ahead and built Gene Woods, maybe the first junior Speedway bike ever, I think it was. And Gene was riding that junior Speedway bike around, ripping it up. And Ed was a great builder, and I met Ed before, and he's like, what do you want? And I go, I want to look at your race, your place where you build your engines and stuff, and off of MacArthur Boulevard and the 55 freeway. And Ed is like, go away. And I'm like, please, Ed, can I watch and see your engine building? And he's okay. So I went ahead and I snuck my way into Ed Schaefer's, like, his engine building thing. And it was beautiful. He wore this white robe, and he was building these engines beautifully. and Rick Woods was winning championships on those engines. They were very fast. So Ed Schaefer was really a great builder, and he built Gene Woods, the first junior speedway bike. So that was really cool. And also in the early days, they had like lots of people going there. Mostly like the surfer people would go there. There was all these surfer guys and beautiful surfer girls. I wasn't actually into the girls at that time. I was only like a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old boy. I wasn't like care about the girls. And the guys would always chase the girls, and the girls would always run away and wear like skimpy tops, and they were all, and the guys would follow the girls, and they would have like fox nights where like the girls would get in for free. That's not fair. The girls would get in the speedway for free, and the guys would have to pay full price. I was a child, so I just paid like 50 cents or something to get in the speedway. But it was really fun. And one of my favorite parts, I liked the speedway races, really just fantastic. It was, those guys were fast, and they were all legends, you know, Cody and all these guys, Sonny Nutter, and just, I mean, it was on, the Bass Brothers, Rick Woods. They were just all amazing riders. And one of my early day favorites was Ruben Benitez. Do you know Ruben Benitez? I used to go to Ruben like after every race when I was a little kid, and I'd say, "Hi Ruben, can I have your autograph?" And he was the nicest guy. He always gave me his autograph. And I say, "Ruben, you're my favorite rider." One of my favorite riders, because I had a few. But I said, "You're one of my favorite riders," and he was really cool. And then I found Ruben on Facebook, and I was like, sent him a friend request, and he accepted. And I said, "Ruben, you're my favorite rider, and I rode Speedway in part because of you. You were like one of my heroes." Ruben didn't win every race, but I just loved his yellow and black leathers. Yellow and black, go figure that. He was a bumblebee. Ruben Benitez was an early day bumblebee, and I didn't know it, but I just loved those yellow and black leathers, and Ruben was a cool guy and a great rider. He won a few times, and I was, you know, cheering for him. And I would see other riders like Dave Galvin. He just passed away last week. Rest in peace, Dave. He was a big contributor to Speedway, and he was a fireman. I remember Dave Galvin was racing, and I talked to Dave when he was a rider. Number 10, Dave Galvin. And Dave said, "If I have one more crash, the fire department is going to like kick me out because I have lots of crashes and injuries." And the fire department did not want him to like race Speedway. But Dave loved Speedway, and he went ahead and raced Speedway. And he told me, he said, "Brian, if I get in one more accident or I have to miss work, they're going to fire me." So I don't know if he got fired or not. Hopefully not. But he just passed away just a couple days ago. So we want to wish you and your family all the best, and rest in peace, Dave Galvin. And you're going to be missed by the Speedway community, and we're so sorry to hear about your passing. So anyways, going back to the Speedway, there was like lots of people, 6,500 screaming fans. And that one of my favorite parts besides the Speedway was the fights. They had lots of fights. You know, I guess they were drinking a lot. Like, I never fight because I was like a little kid, but there was lots of fights in the stands. And then there would be fight over there, and then fight over there, and fight over there, fight down there. There was fights all the time. Like, every 5 minutes, there was like a bunch of drunk, like teenage boys, and they'd be fighting, and then another fight over there, and another fight over there. I liked it. It was like going to a Manny Pacquiao fight, and you had the Speedway too. It was great. So the Speedway was pretty rowdy, and it was a lot of fun. And another one of my favorite parts of the early day Speedway was the mud. They had like really deep mud on the track. Harry Oxley, I guess the mud was really cheap in those days, the DG dirt and everything. And they put really thick mud on the outside. And they just went ahead and just blew mud all inside the stand. So if you sat like the first 3 or 4 rows of the Speedway, the mud would like fly in your face or in your Coca-Cola, or if you drank beer, in your beer. And people were getting blasted. And we would go like jump over the wall and take the tear-offs, the little tear-offs, and put it over our face. And we would watch the races, and the mud would kind of come and plaster all over the tear-offs in our face, and we just loved it. It was great, you know. We had mud all over our face, and our eyes were protected because of the plastic tear-offs. So that was cool. And some of the early day riders that were really cool was like Danny Berserko Becker. Do you remember Danny Berserko Becker, number 22? He was crazy. I bought my first Speedway bike actually from Danny, and he was crazy. I always tell this story with Danny. When I was just a little kid, I watched Danny ride. He was wild, he was crazy, and he was good. And he was handsome. All the girls liked him. Danny Becker was like the early day Bruce Penhall. He was very handsome, and the chicks just loved Danny Becker. And I loved watching him race. And one time, Danny Becker, he was a wild guy. He like rode wild, and he was crazy. When I rode Speedway, I was like a smooth rider. Like I was nothing like Danny, but I loved watching him race. And Danny would like ride the wall. One time I saw this. I swear this is not a joke. You might think I'm lying or something. I don't lie about anything. I have to tell you the truth or I'm in trouble, right? But one day I saw Danny Becker. He was riding the wall at Costa Mesa, turn 1 and 2. I was sitting in like the straightaway, the back straightaway after turn 2. And Danny Becker went hot into the turn, and then he rode a wheelie hitting the wall. He was riding right on the crash wall all the way around like turn 1 and 2 going into the straightaway. And he was crossed up, and he did a full bore wheelie riding going like 60 miles an hour doing a wheelie straight up and down, crossed up. And I was like, no way. Danny Becker was the bomb. I mean, once I saw that, I go, I love Danny Becker. So that was cool. And another early day rider I love, Steve Bass. Steve Bass was really cool. He was so intense. Steve Bass was like, you know, I would go up to Steve, I go watch Steve like in the pits, like, what's he doing? And he was always like mad and always, and he was so intense. If I was a racer and I saw that, I would be scared of him. He was a very scary guy. He was really intense. Steve Bass was really great. And Bill Cody was another great early day rider. He was just fast and he was just smooth. Bill Cody wasn't like Danny Becker. He rode the pole, and he was a really good rider, and just really amazing. And Rick Woods was like Wild Bill Cody. He rode the pole. He wasn't an outside rider like his brother Gene became later. Rick Woods was really fast, and like I mentioned in the show, like to this day, I have visions of Rick. Even right now, I can see him riding the pole at Costa Mesa very fast. And Rick Woods was smooth as glass. He was really great. And Mike Bass, he won 7 United States national championships in the 70s. Rick Woods won 68, and then Steve Bass won the first Speedway championship in 1969. Steve Bass won that at Costa Mesa Fairgrounds in 1969. Steve Bass, the first United States Speedway champion at the Costa Mesa Speedway. And then in 1970 and 72, I believe it was, Rick Woods won the Speedway Championship at the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds. And then he was just fantastic. And there were so many good riders. And then Mike Bass just had a string of wins after that. Mike Bass was winning everything. He won 7 United States Championships in the 70s. 7. And his brother Steve won 1. And so that's 8. And Rick Woods won 70 and 72 for 2 more United States Championships. So the Bass brothers and Rick Woods owned the whole 70s at Costa Mesa Speedway. These guys dominated. Nobody beat the Bass brothers and Rick Woods. And I guess I asked Gene today if like Mike Bass and Rick Woods were friends, and he said no, they didn't like each other. Yeah, because they were alpha males and they were very like strong guys, and they wanted to win, and they won. So you had just 2 guys dominating the speedway scene at the Costa Mesa Speedway in the early days. And they made lots of money. Mike Bass was making lots of money. I remember reading in the Orange County Register when I was a kid that Mike Bass would win like $500 for like the handicap main and $500 for the scratch main. And in the Philippines, that's like 50,000 pesos in one night in 2 hours. So these guys, and that was in 1970s. So if you the inflation rate and all that kind of stuff, they were probably winning like a lot of money, like $3,000, in one night, the winners. And the riders were making a lot of money. Why? Because they had something called the SRA. Do you know the SRA? I always talk about it because it's true. And it was a Speedway Racing Association. And I was a member of that briefly for a year or two. And they went ahead and they was run by Jerry Fairchild. He was my tuner, Jerry Fairchild. He was the one providing the motorcycles, the early day JAPs at the Whiteman Stadium in 1968. This guy was amazing. He doesn't get any credit, but I like Jerry Fairchild. And he was the president of the SRA because Jerry went ahead and he told me he wanted to get the riders more money. He was trying to help the riders and bring more purse to the riders. And they had meeting every Monday at the SRA in Pasadena, California, near Jack Milne's shop over there in Pasadena. And Cordy, I guess, had the shop. They had a motorcycle shop. I used to see that when I was a young boy. And Jerry said, "That's the Milne brothers." And there was an old sign that said Milne brothers. And I'm like, who are they? I know who they are now. And so they had this meeting called the SRA meeting every Monday night. And one night, Jerry, he told me, he's like, "Hey, Brian, do you want to go to the SRA meeting?" And I was working on my bike and hanging out in Pasadena. I work on my bike because Jerry was my sponsor. And I did a lot of the cleaning on my bike, but Jerry would open my engine up and make it go real fast. He was really good. And he was the best. I mean, this guy was the master. He worked for Mercedes-Benz for a long time doing the fuel injection. He was kind of one of the early day inventors of the fuel injection in the cars and stuff. And Mercedes-Benz would call Jerry, and I was working on my bike, and Jerry would say, "Guess who that was, Brian?" And I'd say, "Who, Jerry?" And he'd say, "That was Mercedes-Benz in Germany." And I said, "What do they want?" And he said, "They want me to fly to Germany and teach their people how to do the fuel injection." So Jerry was a genius. And I said, "Are you going to go there?" And he said, "No, I'm too old. I don't want to go there." So he was always getting calls from Mercedes-Benz in Germany because he was so smart. This guy was genius. I mean, if I had 1% of Jerry's mechanical mind, I would be really smart. But I don't. I have 0% of Jerry. I'm not really a good mechanic. I'm terrible, but I can ride a little. So I ride every day, and I still ride every day. I love motorcycles still to today. But anyways, so they had this meeting every Monday night at the SRA, and it was boring. It was really boring. I was like a 16 or 17-year-old kid, maybe just turning 17, maybe late 16. I was a little kid, and I was they were talking about all this stuff and all these fines and stuff. And I was bored, and I just falling asleep, I was like, "Wake me up when it's over." And Jerry was up in the front, doing the conducting of this meeting. And there was 50 people in the sort of chairs. It was really a big thing. And I was just bored to death of those stupid meetings. I was not really good into the slow-paced things, but it was really good. And what happened is that the SRA, they went ahead, like I mentioned, and they gave 30% of the gate to the riders. So what that means is that, let's say if there's 100% of the tickets sold, 6,500 tickets, and that's a lot of money. And 30% of that 6,500 tickets would be given to the Speedway riders. They'd be divvied up, plus they would get a purse. So when they won the races, they would get extra money too. So they got 2 paychecks. They got the 30%, plus they got the money if they won the main event or whatever they did. They got paid for that. So they got 2 paychecks, and they got a lot of money. Mike Bass was cleaning up. He was winning everything. Always, I would look at the register every Saturday if I didn't get to the races, and I would say, "Mike Bass, Mike Bass, Mike Bass." He won all the time. Mike Bass was cleaning everybody's clocks. And that's why he'd go to Europe, because why? He was making a lot of money. Mike Bass made a lot of money, and he was a great rider, a great gator, smart rider. And I raced against him, and he's a good rider. That guy was fantastic. But so Mike made a lot of money, and also the people start booing Mike Bass. And I was watching him in the stands, and people booing him, and I say, "Why are you booing Mike Bass?" And they say, "'Cause he wins all the time. We want to see somebody else win." And so Mike Bass was getting booed a lot. And a couple times in my race days at Costa Mesa, I got booed too, because I actually had a couple of good weeks where I was winning. And I got booed a little bit, and I didn't like that. I don't like to get booed, but Mike didn't care. He just like kept winning. I didn't like it. I really hated it, and Mike didn't care. He was cleaning up. That's why he didn't go to England, because he was making lots of money. So it was really good. So the glory days of Speedway was really great. This was after the Whiteman Stadium. The South Bay Speedway was gone. The El Toro Speedway was gone. There was no competition. And more speedway tracks start popping up, like Irwindale Raceway every Thursday night. In Los Angeles area, they had Irwindale. And then they had, Tuesday night, they had Ventura out in Ventura, California at the beach, right at the beach there. And then Wednesday night, they had San Bernardino. Do you remember San Bernardino? It was cool. Lots of dirt out there. And then, whoa, we have an attack of the bird. And then Thursday night, we had the Irwindale Raceway at Irwindale, California. And then Friday night was Costa Mesa, the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds. It was cool. It was a show. And then they had Saturday night, they had at Bakersfield, was mainly at Digger Helm. He promoted and raced a little bit at Bakersfield, and he actually ran the Bakersfield Bandits team when they had team racing. He was the captain, and they won that championship, the team racing championship, back in 1975 or 6, 1976, 76. And so, anyways, they did that, and Speedway was really great. And the people didn't like the team racing because they wanted to see all the good riders. They didn't want to just see a little bit of the riders. So the team racing only lasted 1 year, and then it went away. But the team racing was really great, and they had so many great riders in. And they had Dangerous Doug Farrell, and they just had all these riders. And then Bruce Penhall started coming up in the 70s. He came up, and he was an instant hit. I think he rode D2 like 1 or 2 times, and he was D1. And then he went ahead and became a superstar. I mean, you just watch like guys like Bruce Penhall, even like his first year or second year, I mean, he was like skyrocketing for success. I mean, there was no stopping guys like Bruce Penhall. Then you had the Moran brothers coming. They were really great, Kelly and Sean. You had all these legends of Speedway coming in the mid-70s. They kept coming in. And Danny Becker had faded out. And then Bruce Penhall became the new cover boy. Everybody liked Bruce Penhall. And I was a young rider at that time, and I was probably not very handsome, and I was trying to like meet some girls at that time, some girls my age, and there were lots of girls that liked Speedway and the Speed Riders, but they all had a crush on who? Bruce the Fox Penhall. And I was like, hey, I remember meeting a girl named Debbie Greger, and I told Debbie, I said, hey, you know, I never dated a girl before. I'm like a total like, you know, virgin guy. And I said, do you like date me? And she's like, no, I like Bruce the Fox Penhall. And I said, oh, I hate you, Bruce. Bruce was like having all the chicks. It was not fair because he was very handsome. And Bruce went ahead and stole all the hearts of all the girls. And so it was crazy. And so I don't know, I never hooked up with this girl because she was so in love with Bruce. And then when she said, okay, Brian, I'll like you, I didn't like her no more because I like a girl who like have a crush on me and that really adores me. And she didn't adore me, and she liked Bruce still. So I said, nah, I like a girl who like likes me, not Bruce Penhall. But Bruce went ahead and cleaned up. And Debbie was telling me about Bruce Penhall. I guess Debbie had like a friend. She had like a girlfriend that was like, I guess wanted to meet Bruce Penhall. Every girl wanted to meet who? Bruce Penhall. And so I said, how is she going to meet Bruce Penhall? Because Bruce is very hard to like meet. And she said, well, she met him last week, and I said, how did she meet him? And she said she was driving in Balboa, California, where Bruce lives and lived, and she crashed right into Bruce's van on purpose. And Bruce had this big, like, brown and white and orange van, and it said Penhall Company. So when you saw that van, you know that it was Bruce Penhall driving it. He had a beautiful new van, beautiful paint job, and he had his name on his van. That was not good, maybe, because the girls would like to meet him. So this girl crashed Bruce Penhall, and I said, oh my gosh. I said, I bet Bruce was mad, because I knew Bruce a little bit when he was that age, and Bruce, I think, wouldn't like that too much, you know, crashing him to meet him. I don't think he'd like you too much. And she says, no, Bruce didn't like her, and Bruce was mad because he crashed into his beautiful van. So girls would crash into Bruce Penhall just to meet him, and I don't think that was a recipe for success with Bruce Penhall. So all this stuff was going on, and actually, I bought my first bike about time in the mid-'70s from Danny Berserko Becker, and I raced the end of that season for like 2 weeks, like 4 weeks, and it's funny because I had like Gene Woods on the show today, and Gene Woods said, yeah, I raced about the last 4 weeks of the 75 season, and I was thinking to myself, I didn't tell Gene, I said, oh, I raced the last 4 weeks of the 75 season. Gene actually started off in D2, and he went quickly to D1 in 76, but I was a D3 rider because I was no good, and Gene was pretty much a famous rider from the get-go, along with Dennis Segalos. Siggy! We had Siggy on the program last week before Christmas, and I showed this program here, right here, if I can get it. I wasn't even planning on talking to you about it. Oh, I have two programs here, and this was Siggy's program when Siggy and I were racing. We were in this program, and I told Dennis, I go, hey, we were in the same program together. So it was kind of funny. Dennis and I rode that year. He just turned 16, and I was 16 a couple months before, and we were racing in event number 11, and Dennis is down here somewhere at the bottom. Dennis Segalos, right there, number 228. Division 3, number 228. And Brian was there on the 0-yard line with Dennis in the first race. One of the first races that Dennis Segalos raced. I kept this program, and it says my first race on here. First race. And that was Rick Woods and Bill Cody on the cover of that. So that was cool. Dennis Segalos was an amazing rider. And I have a little clipping here if I can get it. Let's see if I can get it right here. If I don't kill myself. This was a little clipping I used on Dennis's show. I haven't put it back. This was when Dennis was like 14 years old at the OCIR. It says Dennis Segalos was a future champion, a future rider. And Dennis Segalos, he was a good rider. And when I was a little boy, I had a paper out. And Dennis Segalos and me, we're like the same age. And I went ahead and saw that, and I read that, and I'm like, this is not fair. Dennis Segalos is riding Speedway, and me, I'm delivering papers, saving for my Speedway bike. So Dennis Segalos was a great rider, and he did a video last week or so, and he has like over 6,000 minutes. He has like 150, I think he has like 150 hours of view time. Dennis was a famous rider, an amazing rider. And we thank Dennis for coming on the show because he really is an amazing guy. Did a great job last week. So we had all these great riders in the 70s. It was really amazing and just had a really good time. And actually, what happened is that the glory days of Speedway, they called it the glory days of Speedway, and it came to an end, which is really sad. One day I was working on my Speedway bike. I had became a Division I rider, and I wanted to race in those team races. And Jerry Fairchild was tuning my bike. I was in Pasadena at the time, and Jerry Fairchild had a very sad face. And I turned around, and I was cleaning my bike, getting ready for the races. I had won like 6 Division I handicap mains, low yardage, but hey, I was winning these guys, and I had a really good year. I was racing like my first year at 75. I racing like 4 races, and I was terrible. And then I got a little better practicing and stuff, and Dub Farrell teaching me. And then I got to Division I the next year, and I was winning D1 handicap main events, which was amazing for like a little 17-year-old boy going to El Medina High School. It was really cool. And I would go to school tired, like, oh. And then the teacher would talk in history, and I'm like, I'm tired. I just raced Bruce Penhall last night. I'm very tired. And oh man, it was fun. And I was at Jerry's house. I would go to his shop and work on my bike, and then Jerry would work on the bike too to make it fast, because I was the last D1 rider to ride a JAP. I was the last JAP Division I rider that I know of that was beating like some of these fast guys. And I was the very end of the JAP days, so that was kind of an honor that I never thought about until like a few days ago. But I was working on this JAP, and Jerry went ahead, and he looked very sad. He was very sad face. And I was like, what's wrong, Jerry? And he said, oh, there's a big problem. It's really bad. And he was like going to cry. Jerry never cried, and he was a good guy. Everyone loved Jerry. He was just an amazing guy. And then I said, what's wrong, Jerry? And he said, Harry Oxley cut the SRA, and there's no more 30% purse for the riders. And I said, what? And he said, we're not going to ride at Costa Mesa no more. We're going to boycott it. And I said, oh my gosh. Oh, I was like, I was picturing my riding for the next like 5 or 10 years for Jerry Fairchild, and Dub Farrell rode for Jerry also at that time. I was like the lower guy. Dub was the star. I was like, the young lion. And I don't think Dub liked me very much, because Dub trained me from like nothing. I was like a terrible rider. I didn't even know how to like ride a Speedway bike. And with Dub's lessons and his practice, Dub was really a good teacher, and he's a good rider. And he taught me really good. But Dub probably thought he would never see me again. And then the next year, I'm riding D1 with him. And then I'm hogging his Speedway mechanic, Jerry Fairchild. So I think Dub never really liked me that much, because I was like taking his guy away, He didn't say anything. Dub was a nice guy. And Dub was on Terry the other day, and I guess he said that he remembered teaching me and taking my seat off. But all the time, I don't think Dub liked me that much, because I was taking his like mechanic away. I was stealing him. Jerry liked me because I had the JAP in particular, and he wanted to beat the Jawas. He said, Brian, if I tune your bike, you better promise me one thing. And I said, what? You beat the Jawas. I want you to beat those guys. Show them that the JAPs rule. And I said, okay, Jerry, I'll beat those guys. And I beat the Jawas. I beat a lot of Jawas, and they were fast. The 2-valves. The 4-valves, I don't think I beat. But back in the 2-valve days, I could beat the Jawas, because the JP was a long stroke, and it was very fast. So getting back to the story, Jerry was sad. And he said that the SRA has been cut now by the promoter. And he told me flat out, he said, they're going to be racing for trophies now, and the money is not going to be there in Speedway. And I said, what? Because, I was getting good, and I was planning on making Speedway a career. In my high school, I said, I want to win the United States National Championship. And I was kind of like doing good to be a competitor for the national championship eventually. And then when Jerry Fairchild told me that, he's quitting the Speedway and stuff, and he told me, you have to follow me, because I'm your tuner, and if you don't follow me, it's bad. So Jerry was the only one that knew how to fix my JAP fast, so I had to kind of stick with him. Plus, I'm loyal to my people. And so I had to go with Jerry, which was really bad, because it wrecked my whole Speedway career, really, as far as becoming a big popular name, a Speedway rider and stuff like that. So it really kind of ruined my Speedway days. So that was kind of bad, I was, I was actually had problems with my Speedway days because of Jerry Fairchild and the SRA. They went ahead and they boycotted all the races. They had to strike. Everything bad happened with the Speedway, and it was no good. And it kind of ruined. And I rode the Santa Ana Bowl. It was an AMA track, and I became the top point getter there and raced. I was on the program of the World Qualifier. Jerry watched me, and you know, it was really good. But I just couldn't ride at Costa Mesa, and it really ruined things. And they had like this picket thing, where they had like lots of like protests with picket signs. And Larry Huffman was even in the picket line. I'm going to talk to him when we talk on the show next week or two, if we can get his webcam working. And Larry Huffman was cool. He was an announcer, and he was picketing for the riders. So anyways, so Speedway kind of like got in trouble a little bit because of all the changes, and it ruined a lot of things with the changing, and a lot of the spectators went away. And the glory days of Speedway finally came to an end, and it was sad. And I was talking to Gene Woods today, and he said he got out of Speedway like in the mid-'80s because the money wasn't there anymore. And that's exactly what Jerry Fairchild was saying, that the money would dry up and not be there. So the glory days of Speedway went down. We're trying to like bring Speedway back, you know, bring the popularity back. It's a great sport. American Speedway is amazing. And, you know, a lot of us just love it. It's really, really cool. And I did a lot of blogs on Speedway riders, and we just love the Speedway. And we like to invite, if you're new to the sport, check it out. It's really fun. It's really amazing. It's a 500cc motorcycles, 0 to like 80, 90 kilometers in 2 seconds, 16-to-1 compression on the engine, no brakes. It has a double shaft drive, like a counter shaft and a rear sprocket drive, and it's fast. It's like a rocket ship, especially the new laydowns, and they're really fast. So Speedway is really a great sport, and that's one of the reasons why we go ahead and talk about it a lot, because it's a lot of fun. So anyways, and I know a little bit about it since I was a rider for a couple years. So I retired in 2008 full-time, and I raced in 2012. And maybe next year I'll ride again if you want me to. I don't know how I'll do, but I'd like to win, so we'll see what happens. But no promises. Who knows? I'm out of shape, but maybe. But anyways, the glory days of Speedway came to an end in the late 70s, and it kind of never really came back because of the money situation. And we have a lot of evolution with computers and, you know, Facebook and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a lot of lots of things that take people away from going to the races. So, but hopefully they can get the Speedway racing going back in 2021. We miss it, and we have a lot of young talent. Tomorrow night we have Wilbur Hancock. Do you know Wilbur Hancock? He's the son of legendary Greg Hancock, 4-time world champion. He's an international megastar, and we have his son on the show tomorrow, Wilbur. He was last year's AMA Junior Speedway 250cc national champion. And Wilbur is a really cool kid. He really has a big drive to race Speedway. And you have to have that really desire and really drive to make you become successful in this sport. Nobody can teach you that. It has to come from within. And Wilbur has that. And there's a lot of guys, a lot of junior Speedway riders now that have that too. And a lot of the young Speedway riders. So it's really exciting times for Speedway, actually. We just have to get the races going back again. And hopefully we can get Speedway growing big again. That's our hopes with the show. And we want to introduce people to the exciting, very exciting sport of Speedway. I have lots of Speedway videos on my channel here. So if you're new to the channel, go to my playlist and you can watch me race. I have some races, and there's lots of races of different racers. There's blogs, all these famous European riders, all these American riders. I have like 10 blogs on Bruce Penhall. I did a series of 4 on Mike Bass. It was really, I did like 3 or 4 on the Gene Woods and Rick Woods, and we had Gene on the show like this last night. And we just really love Speedway, and we want it to grow. So we have a lot of Speedway races and blogs on my channel. So just go ahead and check it out and subscribe. We're going to do lots of shows. We have a show lined up for later on tonight. It's early morning here in California, and we have a show at 6 p.m. with Wilbur Hancock, and Wilbur is going to go ahead and talk about some things today about Speedway. So we have a show coming up just in a few more hours, and we just want to thank you so much for watching and also subscribing to the channel. It's really cool. We're growing the channel, and you can get notified of all these future events that we have. And after Wilbur, we have Aaron Fox, the two-time Speedway champion. So we have lots and lots of things coming up. We have lots of guests coming up, and we have Bruce Penhall coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. Another reason you'll want to keep in touch. So we have the amazing Bruce the Fox Penhall. Bruce the Fox Penhall. He's an amazing rider. So thank you so much for enjoying this impromptu 1964 to today Speedway talk. It's just a show I wanted to do and hang out and talk a little bit about Speedway. And later on tonight, 6 p.m. California time, we're going to have Wilbur Hancock. And this kid is good. He's going to be a future star. I can pretty much guarantee that. So we're looking forward to seeing Wilbur, and we're rooting for Wilbur and his future. Stay healthy, Wilbur. And we're going to look forward to our show. It's going to be a great show, so stay tuned for that coming up in a few hours. So please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year. And we'll see you. Take care.